Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to episode 2 of D Ruins Films, the podcast for film lovers and haters alike. I hope you enjoyed our Oscars episode from 2 weeks ago. Thank you to those who have already shared your thoughts and reflections. We love the feedback. Keep it coming. We need it. We love it. Keep it coming. Anyway, we have a pretty awesome episode cooked up for you today. But first, let's get into D's top 5. So, in no particular order, this episode's top 5. Picture this. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to see it. It's on Amazon Prime. It features the lovely and talented Simone Ashley. It's a rom-com. For those of you who know me, I'm not a big rom-com person, but I loved this one. It's got South Asian representation. It's funny. It's cute. It's heartwarming. Totally worth watching. Our next recommendation of the top 5 this week, The Residents. I'm working my way through it. I think I'm on episode 6 now, but it is excellent so far. It is on Netflix, featuring Miss Uzo Aduba. Her character is amazing. So funny. Like, so funny. Truly and sincerely. If you're into like murder mysteries, think like Knives Out meets Clue, kind of, but in TV show format. It's really well done. Great heavy hitting cast, super talented folks, well acted. Again, very funny and very smart too. Next up, we have Flow, a well deserved winner from our Oscars. It won Best Animated Feature and it deserves it. I'm just gonna go ahead and say this one's an emotional ride. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel the emotions. You're gonna go through all of the changes. It's just very gripping. And the animation obviously is beautiful, very well done, gorgeous work. We love to see animation artists in their craft doing what they love and doing it well. But it's also just a beautiful narrative. And I think there's something powerful about a narrative that really does speak loudly, even though there's not a single word of dialogue in it. It doesn't have any dialogue, but it tells a powerful story. And the messages and the themes are so clear and so succinct and in your face. So it's on, I believe, Max. I think it's on Max. If I could be wrong, but go watch it. Sing Sing just recently dropped. I want to say it's also on Max. Whew. It got 2 noms for Oscars. It did not win either of them, I don't think, but it definitely deserved way more love than it got. Frankly, I think it should have been a Best Picture nomination. It should have probably won Best Picture. Coleman Domingo should have taken Best Actor. The cinematography was stunning. They did a lot of handheld shots, and it was just really well done. They actually had folks who are incarcerated in Sing Sing, who are part of that acting program that's being highlighted in the film. They were a part of the film. So, yeah, it's worth supporting, honestly. Truly a wonderful film. And then my last from the top 5 of the episode is Severance Season 2 on Apple TV. I'm not all the way through the end, so don't spoil me. I know some of y'all have seen the finale already. I have not. Don't spoil me. But it's good. It's really good. It's really deep. And like, I loved season 1 a lot and was definitely very excited and hyped up for season 2 to drop. And it has been keeping me on the edge of my seat. So go see it if you haven't seen it. Like, go watch it. Get into it. I'm telling you, you will love it. Anyway, that's my top 5 for the week. If you do watch any of these, feel free to holler back at us. Let us know. Hit us up on social media, dekej.media on Instagram or Dekej Media on Twitter. You can also comment on the podcast directly on Spotify and YouTube. Also, we're on Apple. But yeah, you can comment back to us there. You can let us know what you think. If you did take any of these recommendations and watch them, we love to hear what your feedback is. All right. So this week's In Focus, our main topic, our main thing, our main squeeze is overlooked films of 2024. Films that I felt like deserved a lot more love and noise than they got. And I have a long list actually, but I'm only going to go through, let me see. I think 5. Yeah, I'm going to go through 5. So it's like an extended top five for this week's episode. But like looking back to last year. So, first things first, we want to talk about this amazing, funny comedy that I saw. Just happened to just come up on my Hulu at some point last year, and I put it on my watch list and I sat down and watched it and I loved it. That is Thelma. Thelma is an incredibly funny film. It is about an old woman who gets caught up in a phone scam and is trying to get her money back. I'm not going to go into all the details of it because I want you to go watch it. I think it's worth watching, but I think it's incredibly funny. And one of the things that was striking for me about it is the age representation. It is a film about older people and it features older people, including my girl June Squibb. I love her. If you have not watched her work, you need to watch her work. She's a fantastic actress, so funny, and so talented. But it was just great. It was refreshing because I don't think we get to see a lot of films that feature older people in the forefront telling the story in this kind of way, in a very funny way. And there's a little bit of action in it. Nothing too crazy, but like there's a little bit of action in it. And, it just features old people being badasses, doing things their way and, taking matters into their own hands and getting down to the bottom of things. And it addresses this whole idea of what it's like to age and how people view you as you get older and how you view yourself. And like, there were just so many wonderful choices that kind of highlighted that. You see June's character Thelma like going through the changes of being an older person and wanting to access the world the same way that she did before, but not necessarily being able to, and her family treating her differently because they think that she has to be protected like in a glass bubble. She has to be like kept, and we need to like watch out for her, and she can't do this alone. We have to drive you. Like all of these kinds of things come up over and over and over again. And I think like that also plays into like the larger narrative of the phone scam. Like there's this whole concept and belief and idea that like the elderly are more susceptible to these things because they're not as tech savvy or they're not as aware of what's happening. And so, they're more trusting. They're more likely to like, if you call them and you say that you're somebody that they know, they're going to believe that. They're not going to vet you. And then they're going to, fall into these scams. And it's something about the fact that like there was a vulnerability in Thelma's character, like once she realized she'd been scammed and like feeling like something had been taken from her, not just her money, but like something emotional had been taken from her, something spiritual had been taken from her, something from within her had been taken. She felt violated, obviously, because she'd been lied to and tricked, and that became like the motivating factor for her to get to the bottom of it. And like she tried to, do all of the channels that you're supposed to go through, call the cops, work with your family, like all of that. But she was determined to get it back herself. And she figured it out, like against all odds, she figured it out. So it's a wonderful story. It's super entertaining. It's super funny. It's super cute. I think there's a lot of really good moments throughout. And it turns out the film is actually loosely based on a true story. The director, um, his own grandmother went through something like this. So that was what inspired the story. And so you get to see a clip of her at the end, his real grandmother, and it's very cute. She's very cute. She's very wonderful. You can tell that she's very fiery and feisty. So, yeah, go watch it. It's a good film. I think it deserved more love. I frankly think it should have gotten some nods in the Oscars or at least somewhere in the award circuit. I don't think it really got much love and it could have gotten way more. It definitely wasn't something that I saw talked about widely, and I think it should have been talked about widely. And at the end of this segment, I do want to talk a little bit about that, about like how do we determine the metric of what makes a film worthy of widespread talk and chatter. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Another film that I feel like was overlooked, not necessarily because it wasn't talked about, but because it deserved way more love, in the reviews and in award season, and just generally speaking, it's just such a great film that I didn't like. It was out in theaters, but like I didn't see enough chatter about it personally for me. And that is A Quiet Place Day One. I know like people are probably a little bit tired of the Quiet Place franchise because, you know, we had one and then we had two and now we have this one and blah, 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 blah. And I think they're talking about doing another one, which I'm kind of like, they should have just leave it alone at this point. Like, I think Day One was a perfect film to wrap it up with. But, you know, Hollywood going Hollywood and these studios, they see dollar signs before they see anything. So, of course, they're going to put money on something that they want, you know, to get more revenue from. But anyway, Quiet Place, Day One. First of all, Lupita Nyong'o. Oh my goodness. Like, obviously, I'm very well versed in this woman's talent and her range. I've seen her work. I've seen quite a bit of the things that she's been in, including Us, you know, obviously including Black Panther and Wakanda Forever. I've seen her do, like, she just voiced in The Wild Robot, and I think she gave such a wonderful voice acting performance in that. Um, you know, and obviously there's so much more. Like, that's not all that she's in, and that's not all that I've seen of hers. But I just wanted to name some of the highlights that I have been thinking about lately. And this is one of her films that is just so amazing, just really shows her range, like really shows what she's capable of and the emotional depth that she has and the way that she can truly carry a story and really bring a character to life in a way that you connect with viscerally. Her character in this, I was walking with her every step of the journey. Like, every emotion she had, I felt it. Every moment, every beat, every change, I felt her moving with it. Her determination, her, you know, insistence, her grappling with her own mortality, like all of it, I felt it. I felt connected to it. I felt like I could relate to it. Um, you know, in the midst of everything that was going on. And if you're familiar with the Quiet Place franchise, you know that like this is a post-apocalyptic world where these aliens have come to Earth and they've come and taken over, and they're very sensitive to sound. They can't see, they're blind, but they're very sensitive to sound. And so if they hear you, they'll kill you. So the world has had to adapt and learn how to function by limiting sound as much as possible and finding ways to muffle sounds that are impossible to completely eradicate. And so, like, if you've seen the first one, if you've seen the second one, you've seen them living in that post apocalyptic world. Well, Day One brings us to the day the aliens come to Earth and, like, how people navigate that. And it's so interesting. I watched that film and I was thinking a lot about how quickly do humans actually adapt to disaster and change? How quickly do we accept that our reality has changed? And I think the film is much more generous to us as a species than we actually really like. It's realistic to who we are. And I'm thinking about so many things. I'm thinking about COVID response and how people were so resistant to doing the bare minimum of masking and are still resistant to the idea of it, even though COVID still exists and is still killing and disabling so many people. The idea of it, like, before, but like, I'm not even thinking, like, we don't even have to think about the now. Like, just thinking about when we had the onset of COVID in 2020, how many people were resistant to masking, how many people were resistant to shelter in place, how many people like were so resistant to all of these things and didn't want to like make changes in order to adapt to the way that the world was in that moment. And that's just, that's real. Or I'm thinking about like, you know, in a similar vein, like when New York had all of the wildfires that happened, and you know, like you could see the haze in the sky, and folks are like still out doing yoga without a mask on in the hazy, smoky sky when all inhaling all of that ash and chemicals and all of those things. And it's like, are we as human beings actually capable of adapting to sudden drastic changes in our environment and in our experience? Like, are we able to really like understand the assignment immediately? And like, that's just the question I was asking myself thinking about it and watching that film. It's so powerful because you see the people quickly figure it out. Like, and obviously there's a handful of people who don't, and like obviously lots of people still die, but like human beings quickly figured out we have to be quiet. And then the second thing they figured out is we have to get to the water because they can't swim. And so it was kind of powerful to watch people kind of rally together and join in community, which is another theme, like coming together and working together to survive and create what we need to create in order to survive, which is what we have to do now, really. Like, if we really want to survive the climate crisis and all these other things, like, we have to learn how to come together and put our skills together and our knowledge together and work together to be able to make it. We have to get out of this individualism that we tend to cling to, especially in the West. But I digress. This is a film podcast. Let me try to keep it about film. Like, basically, how, like, can we adapt? Can we read the room quickly enough when our lives are on the line? And I think the answer is really no. I'm a bit of a pessimist in that regard, and it's not just because I don't think highly of us as a species. I don't, but like, it's more so because I've observed our behavior. The patterns speak for themselves. Whenever there have been moments of crisis, moments of drastic change where we have to adapt, where we have to think about things differently, where we have to, we have to put on new behaviors, we don't do it well. And a lot of us are resistant. We have that cognitive dissonance that kind of like steps in and really impacts our ability to do what needs to be done. And so, how does that impact, like, how does that translate into this world where we see people instantly rallying, instantly putting their heads together, instantly saying, the aliens attack everything that makes a noise, so we have to be quiet and we have to hunker down. Like, it's wonderful to see. It feels almost utopian to see people actually like turn their brains on and connect dots and then adapt and change their behavior accordingly because they know that that's what has to happen for their survival. But it also was bittersweet to watch because it's like, I don't see us actually being like this. I feel like in the real world, if some aliens came down to Earth and they were sensitive to sound and the only way to survive is to be quiet, most of the population would be wiped out, like within a matter of hours. I feel like the majority of people would not get it. And like those of us that did get it, like, would be ridiculed. And there'd only be a few of us left. I mean, and I guess, okay, you can still keep the human race going if some people are able to adapt. But I just don't think it would be as many people as we saw. Like, I don't think it would be as many survivors as we saw. And that's just me in my pessimistic ways. But anyway, that's one of the themes that I really picked up on. The other theme, obviously, the theme of grief. And, a little minor spoiler here. Lupita's character is dying. It's never really said explicitly, but you can deduce it's probably something like cancer. And so she already has this sense of like understanding her own mortality and knowing that like death is imminent for her. So therefore, not feeling really a strong desire to like, she's not feeling a strong connection to like survive in this circumstance. Like, she is doing what she can to survive. She is able to be quiet, but like her focus isn't like, let me get to safety. It's, I need to have some New York pizza. Like, I came to get some New York pizza. And like, you learn later that it's associated with a memory of her father. So she's trying to relive something that brought her joy previously, and that is a part of her life, and trying to like have another connection to that while she still can. And like, not to get too deep into all the things that happen, but you see like the path, like you see a lot of grief, a lot of like grieving the things that once were, grieving things that she once had. One of the most striking moments in the film for me was a moment where she was, I think, outside a bookstore, and like the books were kind of like scattered out, and she like picked one up and just like very quietly and carefully opened the book and was like smelling the pages of it and just like cherishing that scent of a freshly opened book that she can hold in her hands. It's things like that. It's like grieving like the things that we had. And I think in the context of the situation too, and knowing that everything is changing, like, you know it's going to be more difficult to thumb through the pages of a book without it making noise. So now we have to grieve not just like the way the world was before, but we have to grieve like what we no longer have access to, those little things. And that's just one of the more powerful things about grief too, is like it does come in the little moments. It comes in those little tiny things, those little seemingly insignificant things. And you feel the loss like majorly in those moments. And so I think that was so profound the way that they explored that. And from a technical perspective, the cinematography was absolutely stunning. Lots of gorgeous views of New York City, you know, and post apocalyptic New York City that's being absolutely ravaged and wrecked by these aliens, but also being able to see some of the things that are still intact. At one point, we're in the subway, like going through the tunnels. Lots of great shots of that in the experience. The VFX are great. You see a lot of the aliens in this one, so VFX are very great. The sound design is very great. I love the way that they like the noises that they have the creatures make. Very very precise and very like distinct sounds, but also really highlighting the difference between like silence, the juxtaposition of silence, like human silence and like natural sounds. You know, we have rain, we have water, we have things like that. And those are used to mask noises, which is great and helps people to be able to talk while they're still adapting to this change. But like really the profound use of silence and also the profound use of noise, because when noise is introduced, it's introduced deliberately, not just to create the shock value of like the aliens coming in. Obviously, yes, we have moments like that, but there's times where it's used very strategically to be able to like continue the story in a very very impactful way. There are a couple of scenes I can think of that have a lot of silence in them, but they're scenes that like would normally expect there to be some kind of noise accompanying it, some kind of music, some kind of something. And like you see in this new world where they've adapted to how things are, like the silence of it all, the choice to keep it silent, the choice to like really hone in on silence and not like create an imaginative world where we hear music or whatever in the background and like they're in their minds about it. Like you literally just see the silence. And I think it's so great. As a former soundie myself, I'm very very I very much geek out about how sound is used and how sound is placed and how sound designers choose to build that sound bed, because I think it helps drive the narrative, it helps tell the story. And we'll have an episode about that at some point, because I know there's been the great debate of like what matters more, sound or picture. And like the short answer is both are equally important, really and truly. But people forgive bad picture. People don't really forgive bad sound. So, that's just my little teaser for how that episode's gonna go. So y'all, so y'all are gonna be mad at me after that one. Probably all my camera folks are like, "Love you, promise, mean it." Anyway, that is A Quiet Place, day one. Definitely a fantastic watch. I urge you to see it if you're able to stomach horror. I know not everybody can, but it is very good. And I will also say, like, if you're not a big horror fan, like it is a good film to watch because it doesn't really lean on the scary stuff. Like, yeah, the scary stuff is happening. The post-apocalyptic alien stuff is happening, but that's not the center of the narrative. And there's a lot more driving the story, and that's something that I really love. I do love a good like campy cult classic horror that's just like random frights and booze and like there's plot but very little plot. It's more so just like following the formula. But I really do love a horror film that tells a story. And this is a horror film that tells a story. So definitely worth the watch. My next one is Monkey Man. Monkey Man. Yes, South Asian John Wick style action film for the win. Dev Patel, you did that thing. So I love John Wick. I love the John Wick franchise. Keanu Reeves is so amazing in it. I've watched every John Wick film multiple times. So if I am saying that this film reminds me of John Wick, I mean it, And I mean it with love. And I mean it as a high praise compliment type of thing. Like even down to the cinematography, um, the fight choreo, all of it really reminds me so much of John Wick. Now, where it kind of differs is we see the inclusion of a trans storyline, trans arc. Dev Patel's character ends up in this temple, which is full of what are considered rejected members of society, trans folk. The I hope I am pronouncing this correctly. Hydras, I think. Hydras. I hope I'm saying that right. If not, somebody please school me. But the Hydras, who are transgender folks who, again, are often rejected in society, the representation of India's transgender community. In this particular space, they are very much in this story like they're seen as rejected. They're kind of like in this temple, like, nobody really cares for them. They're just on their own. They've created their own community. And it is a beautiful arc, a beautiful representation, seeing all of them. And I think they actually used real hijras, consulted with and featured in the film. And they get in on the action too, which is really awesome and really badass. I loved it so much. It was so, so good. And again, South Asian representation for the win in spaces that Hollywood often does not carve out for them. We talked about in the top five, we have a rom com with Simone Ashley. Now we have an action film with Dev Patel, and it's so good. It is such a good film. I watched it and I didn't know what to fully expect. I knew Dev Patel was in it. I knew we had some trans representation. I didn't know much about it going in, but then when I came in and I was like, this is John Wick coded. Like it's so John Wick coded. The action, the vibes, so very much felt like a John Wick film from top to bottom. I encourage you to watch it. I loved the cinematography. I loved the lighting choices throughout in various spaces. I loved just the cuts, the edits, the beats that it employed. It was very much like the pacing was where it needed to be. And again, like really the biggest thing for me with this was the trans representation. I think if we're going to include trans people in a narrative, that they may not necessarily be front and center, but if we're going to have them be a crucial part of the narrative, like this is how you do it. This is how you represent trans people. You know, it's how you represent marginalized communities in general. You bring folks who are actually from those communities in, you tell the story authentically, you give them their own voice, and you give them space to exist in places that they don't get to exist in normally. And we can still tell the stories of what it is like to live in those marginalized spaces while also giving them the chance to be badass and like fight, you know? That to me is everything. It's everything. So I loved seeing it. I loved getting to be a part of that. And I think it should have gotten way, 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 way more love, way more publicity, way more everything than it got. Truly. And again, I can be an action girly from time to time. It's not something that I like go to. Like I have my action films that I like really like, but I'm not a person who just is gonna pick up a random action film typically and watch it. And this one is good. This one's really, really good. Definitely worth it. Yeah. Monkey Man. Our next one that we're going to talk about, She Taught Love. So, romance. If you remember in the last episode, I brought this up in my top five, and I'm going to talk about it in greater detail here because I think it deserves to be talked about much more than it is. First of all, Arsama Thomas, the woman that you are, the gift that you are, the actress that you are, the talent that you are. Uh, the performance was everything. You gave us emotional depth. You gave us walking through an illness. You gave us facing mortality, similar to what Lupita Nyong'o did. You gave us falling in love. You gave us conflict and resistance in those situations. You gave us struggling with communication. You gave it to us, and you gave it to us good. And it was just so wonderful to watch. I love watching Arsama Thomas work, and like she did that. I'm also not a big romance film person. I'm not like a person who will go pick up a romance automatically. I saw this one and knew I wanted to watch it because I knew Ursula Thomas was in it. And I left feeling very satisfied. Also, wanting to support Black films and Black romance films specifically because, you know, a lot of people will complain like there's not enough diversity of these experiences for, you know, our particular community. You know, you'll hear like, oh, Black people, we only get these types of films and we never get enough of those type of films. And so I wanted to really support a film that deviates from what a lot of people think is the typical narrative for us. Something about She Taught Love, like it wasn't like Love Jones. It wasn't like exactly like Love Jones, if you've seen that film, but it had Love Jones vibes. If you've watched it, you might know what I mean. It had Love Jones vibes. Like there was just an energy in their romance, and ease in their romance that felt like Love Jones a bit. And it was like their love was very cute and their relationship was very cute. It had some toxic moments, but like it was very cute generally. And like that's the thing, like with romance films, you're gonna have like the toxicity, you're gonna have the conflict, you're gonna have the resistance, you're gonna have the guy who can't get his shit together, you're gonna have, you know, the communication problems, you're gonna have all of that stuff. But like it was done so well, it wasn't overplayed, it was very like realistic to what a relationship looks like and the challenges that relationships see, without really doing too much of like trying to like, oh look, and it wasn't really like demonizing one side or the other. And then it brought in like illness and facing mortality. And I'm gonna tell you, the film almost got me. I thought it was gonna end a certain type of way because of how things were looking. And I'm not gonna say specifically because I don't want to spoil it for you. But I thought it was gonna end one way, and it ended another. And it was an interesting surprise the way they played it because like you look like the way the narrative was going it was going one direction, and then like when you get towards the end of the film it seems like it's driving that direct it's just driving in that same direction, and then it kind of takes a turn. And it was interesting, but I liked the way they did it. I'm not going to say it was clever because I don't think it was like a twist or anything like that. It wasn't like a plot twist, but it just was a change. And like I'm cool with it. I'm cool with the way that it went. I'm cool with the way that it ended. It was a satisfying ending. It just took me a little bit by surprise that that's how they wanted to end it. And it's like, that's fine, you know? So definitely worth seeing. It is a stunning film in general, just like visually stunning. So, you know, something easy and good on the eyes. I know a lot of people are talking about how gray everything is, how dark everything is, how faded all the colors are. This is not that film. There's a lot of vibrance, there's a lot of light, there's a lot of visual. You can see things, there's a lot of color. And I love that too. I love, like, this is the thing for me. Like, and I have an episode dedicated to this too, talking about lighting and color grading and things like that. And like, obviously, we make choices. You know, we make choices on set, we make choices, you know, in the edit suite, in post, when we're doing color grading, all of that. And there's reasons for those choices. You know, there are narrative reasons for those choices. Whether they land or not is an entirely different conversation, but we do make those choices. I do, however, love when a cinematographer, a director, an editor, a colorist, they lean into highlighting the work of the set designers, the production designers, the set dressers, because a lot of times that's the thing that ends up being the letdown. Like in the effort to kind of like set a certain narrative precedent through color and light, what ends up getting lost is the work of others who have collaborated on the project. You know, people who have made intentional choices about set design, about colors of, you know, colors that are used on the walls in a particular room, or, you know, having certain props that are supposed to kind of like catch your eye and stand out, or like, you know, especially as you're trying to like introduce a character and their personality, like you set their space up a certain way, and so you have certain colors, you have certain vibes that you're trying to create. And that is all, those are all intentional choices as well that are meant to feed the narrative and drive character. And when certain lighting and coloring choices are made that kind of contradict that, like set designer choice, that set dresser choice, even sometimes costuming choices. I feel like we lose some of the oomph behind those things. And I think those details are important too. So it's nice to see when a cinematographer, a director, a colorist, an editor, like take the time to do what they can to really bolster the work of others by making it be seen. And like that happens a lot in this film. Very visually stunning in that sense. So yeah, She Taught Love. My last film, overlooked film of 2024, The Watchers. And this one there was a lot of discussion about and I saw a lot of ads for it. But I don't think a lot of people understood what it was going to be about or what it was like, what the story was. And so, like, I didn't see a lot of chatter about people who had watched it afterwards, which felt strange to me because it was a continuing in the Shyamalan legacy um, and tradition of filmmaking. You have Ishana Night Shyamalan, who is M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, make her directorial debut with this film. And the thing about it is like you can tell who her daddy is. Like she clearly has her own distinct style of storytelling, and it shows. She does definitely carve out her own path, but there's also just like you can tell that she was raised by a man who creates films that are like weird and that explore the supernatural and like dives into like these strange worlds. Like you can tell. Like you absolutely can tell. You've got the Fae lore in there. It was so interesting to see that like not just be explored, but like see the Fae folk come to life and the visual interpretation of what they look like. And yeah, it's pretty intense. Definitely not what I would have imagined in my mind when I think about Fae and fairy lore. And I'm not thinking about like Tinkerbell either when I think about fairy lore. When I talk about the specific kind of fairy lore, I'm obviously speaking about the kind of fairies that we are afraid of, the ones that like people worship and like leave out like gifts for, and have all of their like specific rituals and superstitions around. I'm thinking about the scary fairies. I'm not thinking about Tinkerbell and like little fairies with wings that have little pixie dust. Like nothing wrong with that. I'm thinking about the ones though that like fuel nightmares. And like I wouldn't have thought that this particular visual representation of them is what would like is how they would be seen. Like that's not how I would have pictured them, but I liked the way that they were done. I liked the way that they were done. Story was interesting. It started off going in what looked like one direction, and then it kind of like changed. My only slight complaint with the story was I kind of figured out where it was going or what was going to like not where how it was going to end per se. The ending I think was a little bit more surprising to me, but like there was a certain point where I figured out kind of what I think the twist was supposed to be or what the big reveal was supposed to be. And that may not be everybody's testimony, but for me, I was able to kind of like figure it out after a certain point. Like there was something that just kind of like gave it away for me. And I was like, I think this is where this is going. And I was right. And so that kind of takes me out of it when it becomes predictable like that. Not that this is a formulaic film or anything like that. I just saw the patterns. So I don't know. I don't know if there's really any solution to that, but that's just from my perspective. I figured it out. What I will say, I just kind of like went on a whole conversation about like lighting and cinematography and things like that. And I do definitely have an episode planned to talk specifically about lighting. We will dive into this a lot more deeply and intensely in that episode. We'll dive in that episode. But I will say this. This is a film where low lighting was done right. It was done stylistically. It was done to serve the narrative, and it made sense for the themes that we're seeing, for the whole concept of like trying not like you're being watched and you're being seen, but you don't know who's watching you. And like that unknown kind of factor, and like things are kind of fuzzy and gray, and like there's just a lot of like what's going on. I think that is how you do low lighting. I don't think like I said, we will have a whole episode dedicated to this topic. I will speak specifically about it. I will give specific examples. And like I'm not a person who thinks that there should never be any low lighting used and that we have to keep everything technicolor bright all the time. I just think that if we're going to make a decision to have low faded lighting or like dimmed down color, it needs to be done with a purpose, and it needs to make sense for the narrative, and it needs to, again, not clash against the work of others who are collaborating on the project. So I think this was the perfect film to demonstrate how low lighting can be done well. And maybe I'll pull some examples from this specifically to highlight when I do talk about the low lighting episode. We'll see. We'll see. We talk about the lighting episode. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah. So that is that. So to kind of wrap up this whole segment, the question, I think, and it's not really, this is not the takeaway. The takeaway is going to be at the end, but this is just something that I bounce around in my head a lot because I see a lot of folks, and this is something that I think about too and I talk about too. Like, I think a lot of folks see specific films and specific types of films that get a lot of the publicity, a lot of taking up a lot of the bandwidth and a lot of the chatter online and everywhere. You know, they're the ones that, get the awards, they're the ones that get the money. And the question becomes, how do we find these films that are often overlooked? And sometimes you see the underdogs and the overlooked films make it into the mainstream conversation. I think Everything Everywhere All at Once was one of those. Like, I think it was not, I think just based on the budget that they had and the way that they brought it to life, they didn't expect it to be what it is. And it was a sleeper hit, you know. People loved it. It was a good film. And so people started talking about it and it picked up a lot of steam, and it really kept that steam and momentum all the way into award season, and then it swept, which it deserved to. It was an amazing film. But like, how do we get more films like that to have that same kind of like impact? How do we get to the point where these films that are so good and that tell so many unique stories and bring so many unique perspectives on the table, like, how do we give those more room to be discussed, and how do we show that they deserve to get the opportunities to shine and the money? In the last episode, I talked about how one of the speeches at the Oscars talked about like making films for cinema, and it's like, okay, well, give them money, give filmmakers the money to make it for cinema. Stop making remakes, stop making sequels, and give these what seem like riskier choices more of a shot, and then see what happens. But I also think like part of why these studios get away with ignoring these types of films, or like the mainstream ignores these type of films, is because not enough people are talking about it. So how do we get to the place where these films are being talked about more and people are engaging with them more? So it shows, it demonstrates very loudly to the powers that be that people do want to see this, and that people do want to hear about these types of things, and they want to be involved with these types of films. How do we get to that point? So I don't know. It's something that I think about a lot and I'm trying to chew on a lot. Like, I think I kind of like go back and forth between like, make the film that you want to make, obviously with the budget that you're able to like conjure up, but like, make the film that you want to make and just put it out there and like let the rest happen. But the other side of me is like, at some point, how do we get to the reality of the fact that like, if we don't, if these films don't present a certain type of way, or like they're not receiving like the attention that they should be receiving, then that becomes another excuse for why we don't want to make a film like that. We'll just take our chance with what we know is already going to make us money instead of looking at this riskier option. So I don't know. If any of you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Definitely slide into the comments and tell us what you think. So that's our In Focus. So we're going to move into our creative spotlight for this episode. Just one today, and that is One of Them Days. It is a Black buddy comedy out on Netflix. I am looking forward to watching it. I wanted to see it in theaters, but didn't make it out. So I'm glad that it's on Netflix now, featuring Issa Rae, SZA, Keke Palmer. I've heard so many good things about how funny it is and how great of a film it is. So I'm encouraging you, watch it. Tell us what you think. And maybe we'll be talking about it in a future episode. Yay! Okay, so before we exit out and get into the takeaway, for this episode, I do want to bring back a conversation that we talked about in our last episode, and that is how to get involved with this. This is probably the last time that I will mention this. So, if you want to get involved, get involved. If you don't want to get involved, that's okay. So there are a few ways that you can support us and get involved directly with this podcast. One of them is guest appearances. If you're a filmmaker who has work to promote, if you have expertise in filmmaking that you want to share, if you're just passionate about film and you just want to talk about it with me, I don't mind having a yapper join me in the conversation. We have a Google form that you can fill out if you go to the link in our bio on our Decage Media socials. It's available and live. Feel free to fill it out. We'll reach out to you and try to coordinate schedules and topics and all of that. So if you have expertise or you have a project or anything like that, we'll kind of try to time it with the things that we already have slated for this season. If it doesn't work to fit in with the season, then we can think ahead to season 2. I like to plan, so don't worry. We'll find a way to fit you in. So that's one way. Audience feedback. We love hearing from you. We love your thoughts. We love your opinions. We love just general comments and recommendations that you might have. These things may get actually highlighted in our episodes if you say something profound or poignant enough that we want to talk about it on here. But comment on things, respond. You can engage us on social media. You can join our Patreon to participate in discussions directly and even have a chance to recommend topics and films that might be utilized in future episodes. Or you can always email us at dekej.media@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. We really do. So I'm so serious when I say that. I cherish your thoughts. Please share them. And the last way that you can support the show is tangibly with money, because it is my goal right now. I am producing this on my own, and I have a little microphone and I have my little setup on my laptop, and I edit this myself, and then I put it out there into the world and I promote it myself. But it is my goal to see a little bit more scale up. I'm not trying to be big or anything like that, but I would like to go to like a live stream setup where I could actually do a video live stream recording of me doing this and put that on YouTube instead of just audio with a picture of the logo. I would like to get to the point where we have that kind of thing going on. I would like to upgrade my mic setup as well, and other things like that. So all of those things take money. If you want to help us get there, we'd love to have you. There are 3 tiers that you could potentially help us at. Tier 1, Friends of Film, is $1, $1 a month. It gives you advanced access to the show links, so the day before you get the show, you get to hear it before everybody else. It gives you access to live streams of the show, so once we get the live stream set up, you can literally watch me record live and maybe even enjoy and join in live conversation that way. And then you'll be a part of an exclusive chat that will be on Discord, where you can connect with other people who also like film and who also listen to the podcast and share their opinions. Tier 2 is our Cinephiles tier, $5. You get everything that Friends of Film get, plus you get to give input on the films that are watched and discussed. And when we drop merch, which I hope to be able to do, you get advanced access to the merch. Last tier is the Auteurs tier, $10. You get all of the above from tier 1 and tier 2, and you get a sponsorship shout out on the show, as well as invitations to a monthly movie club. We will come in, we'll watch, you'll get to see my live reactions to things in real time. It'll be fun, it'll be great. So if you want to help us out financially, that's how you can do it. Otherwise, we just appreciate feedback. And if you want to talk on the show, we'd love to have you. Anyway, that brings us to the end. But before we close out, we have a key question and takeaway that we like to share. And this one is just a series of questions that I actually would love for you all to respond to in comments. I would love for you to talk back to me about this. I would love to hear your thoughts about this, because this is something that's been ringing in my head recently. So on the internet, there's a lot of times discourse when somebody criticizes a piece of art or a piece of media. Everyone gets kind of up in arms and protective and defensive. And I understand when you love something, you really don't want to hear that someone else doesn't love it. But a lot of times people get really like, oh, you just want to be a hater, blah, 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 blah. Like there's a lot of that kind of conversation and like, oh, everyone's just so negative all the time, never supporting this. No, 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 no. And like, yes, I get it, especially in an industry that's very tough, especially on marginalized people. It's hard to hear criticism of work when you want it to succeed and you want those people to succeed. But I think we have to be able to be a conscious consumer of the art that we take in. So, my key questions for us to consider, and I would love to hear from you. What does it mean to be a conscious consumer of art? Why is it important to be a conscious consumer? In a world where so many just want to be entertained, how do we strike a balance between enjoying said art and being able to hear, accept, and even make valid critique of it? You know, I just really think that we should be able to get back to that balance. But how do we? In a world where reactionary conversation tends to be what people want to do more of. So I don't know. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you on that. Hit the comments up on socials, hit the comments up on the podcast. Let me know what you're thinking. I want to know. Or you can hit me up personally if you know me personally. But I would love to start a conversation in a public space where we start thinking about this a little bit more critically. Anyway, that's all for this episode. Thanks for rocking with me for another little chatter, another little nerd out session about film and television. I'm excited to put this out for you and hear what you think. And I'm excited for the topics that are coming up next. Not going to say anything specific, but very excited for where we're going with the season. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you